Okay, 6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. We'll begin with a moment of silent prayer and then the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, we have a quorum, everyone is present. Affidavit of posting. This is a meeting of the Washington County Board of Supervisors. Prior to this meeting, public notice was given by posting a copy of the agenda in the office of the county clerk and emailing the agenda to the West Bend Daily News, which is the official newspaper. In addition, the agenda was emailed to CNI newspaper, Express News, Kewaskum Statesman, Milwaukee Journal, WIBD, WNBC Radio, and WTKM Radio. This above action is in conformity with the state of Wisconsin's open meeting law. We'll begin by considering the consent agenda. Entertain a motion to accept. Supervisor Sorcy, second Supervisor Basil. Any corrections, additions, deletions? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda. I'm going to be moving the interviews and action on appointment of District 11 County Board Supervisor to the front. Could each individual please stand up and just introduce yourself with your name?
My name is Keith Steffen.
Chris Elby.
Doug Newman.
Okay, we will begin by having each individual have 2 minutes to describe to them their assets and things that would bring to the board. We'll begin starting with Mr. Steffen.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for considering me as a candidate for the board of District 11. Oh, does this work?
It's on.
Oh, it's on. Again, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight and be a candidate for District 11. A little bit about myself. I've lived in Farmington for 23 years. Been married for 28. I raised 2 boys in the Kewaskum School District. Went through Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, community activities. My wife is 15 years in special aid at the West Bend High School, Kewaskum High School. I run a manufacturing firm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm the plant manager. I started there right out of high school. I've been there for 38 years. I'm on their financial board now. What we do there is we do a lot of government work for the military. We do all their service awards, Purple Heart, Medal of Honor. So in that, it's very detail orientated. I do everything in the plant from hiring to firing to scheduling to making sure that the products go out on time, on budget. And so that's a little bit about myself. I've always been interested in the county politics and government, but I've never pursued it because I really I didn't have enough time to give it 100%. At this point in my life, I can give it 100%. My schedule is very flexible now, and I just thought it's time to give back to the community that I love. I live in the middle of Farmington, which is probably, to me, one of the most pristine parts of the district. It's got a good mix of agriculture, lakes, farms, everything. It's just beautiful, and I really love the area, and I just thought, why not be the voice of the people for District 11? I'm very excited about the opportunity, and I think that I would be an asset for the board, learning what I know in the private sector and bringing it to the county board. I think I'd be a valuable asset, and I look forward to the opportunity. Thank you.
Mr. Elby?
Also, thank you for letting me be here tonight. A little bit about myself. first generation dairy farmer. I've been in the town 27 years, married 27 years, 4 kids. 3 of them are on the farm with us. We have the largest dairy farm in Washington County. Agriculture is important to me, and I know there's a little bit of representation on the board with agriculture, but I think it's important that we maintain representation and have a positive going forward with agriculture. Town chairman I'm on my 8th year, planning on running again in April. I was on the plan commission for several years before that. I enjoy serving. It's different from my regular life at home. I don't know. I think that's about all for me. Thank you.
Mr. Newman?
Good evening, everyone. I'll echo their words and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Washington County. I've resided in District 11 for 40 years of my 42 years here. Married for 19 years. I have 2 children that are coming up on adulthood. I currently am employed as the Director of Public Works for the City of West Bend. I oversee a staff of over 30 employees with an annual budget of over $5 million. I'm responsible for developing, creating, balancing, spending. It may not be as much as counties, but it is quite a large responsibility. I believe my understanding of municipal government will be an asset to the county board, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you tonight, regardless of the outcome tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. To go back a little bit, these 3 gentlemen are 3 candidates left. We had 3 candidates earlier that took their name from consideration. So what we did in executive is we went and just basically certified that each one of these individuals are qualified to serve as a county board supervisor. It'll be up to you to ask questions to each of the individuals. Should you have any, you all have a questionnaire that they filled out with some basic questions and answers. If everybody had a chance to take a look at those. And if there's any individual questions, we'll open it up for a period of time for questions. You can ask individuals, and at the time when we're done asking questions, we'll open the floor for nominations and we'll vote on the individuals. Okay, thank you. Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to ask the county attorney, Brad, when we do this for the city of Hartford, what we do is we make sure that the question that's asked by any individual alderperson, if we're filling an aldermanic seat, asks the question of all the candidates. Is that something that you would like to do here? Do you think it's not necessary here? I do have a question that I would take the same question and pose it to all 3 candidates. Did you want to do something like that here? So there's a...
It's your choice. I view this very much like it's a public forum if these candidates were up for a debate or an event of some kind. I think it would be fine if you wanted to ask those questions of all 3. It's your discretion.
Right, but so you're not, the example of course would be ask one person one question, another person another question, so there would not be any type of continuity. So you're not interested in following that. I just...
No, I think you should ask the question that you feel each candidate needs to answer to satisfy you that he is qualified.
Thank you much. Okay. Well, I'm going to follow the rules we do in Hartford. So the question I would have for each candidate is very simple: is if you are elected from this body to serve as the representative for District 11, do you plan on running for re-election when the seat comes up on this next round?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So a positive from each one. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Bosher.
Okay, I'd like to ask about levy limits. So if each one of you wants to come up to the microphone and just talk about what your familiarity is with levy limits and what your philosophy is as to whether levy limits are a good thing, if they need to be adjusted, and how you would believe they need to be adjusted.
I have no experience with levy limits. What I would do is I would research it, I would find out the details of it, and then I would make my decision.
Okay, just so you have a little bit of info, levy limits mandate that we essentially can only increase the amount we levy against the general public, so you know
Right.
we're gonna tax,
Okay,
by the addition of net new construction.
okay,
And so meanwhile, the equalized value is going up much faster, the net effect is tax rates go down.
okay.
But it limits there's some, well, I don't wanna tell you too much, I wanna
Right.
hear your thoughts.
Right,
So,
yeah, like
I wanna make
again,
sure-
I would
wanna
have
make
to,
sure you have enough
I'd have to get enough information so I could make a detailed,
Okay.
you know. I don't know a lot about it, but I would, to make a good decision on it, I would have to
Okay.
research it.
What's your feeling in general about taxes and tax rates and where they're at?
Where they're at's fine. Should they be lower? Yeah. Can they be lower? Maybe. You know, that's up to the constituents, you know, which way they want to go on it, but, taxes are always a problem, you know, and nobody likes raising taxes, but sometimes you just have to do it in certain situations. So again, I would take that by basis on how I would vote on that. So,
Okay, thank you. I think next, Mr. Elby, right?
I'm unsure about levy limits as far as the county's concerned. The town is mandated what we can raise by the state.
Yep, and it's, I think, the same equation, so.
Okay, I mean, it's $700 about a year for the town of Farmington. That's all we can raise the taxes, and our expenses are quadrupling in the last 10 years, and we can't do anything about what we're receiving for income. Are taxes too high or too low? I'll give you an example. I probably pay $60,000 in real estate taxes in 3 counties and 6 towns that I own land in. Taxes aren't too high, honestly. Farmland is taxed at a rate for use value assessment. I myself don't participate in any government programs and get subsidies. I don't believe in farmland preservation. I don't think I should pay $5 in property taxes and receive a $9 tax credit. That doesn't work. I make the money to pay the taxes, and levy limits, they need to be looked at on how like our town can raise some more income.
Okay, thank you.
My experience with levy limits is very limited also. That's not a part of my duties at my position at the city. As far as the taxes go, being in the public sector, I'm constantly dealing with public input, and I call it maybe uneducated input. If residents would understand why this is charged, that's charged, what the taxes are for, why they're going up, why they're going down, I think they'd understand a little bit better if they knew the reasons, knew why things are done the way they are. That's why I like to keep the residents informed, and a transparent form of government is that way.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Jenkins.
I didn't have a question as much as just a general comment. I just want to be upfront with my support of Doug Newman for this spot. I know just from working with him at the city, he has an amazingly strong work ethic. His ability to take on that information and grow in his role in public works within the city, I think would be an immense asset to our county board. So I just want to be upfront with my support.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the candidates? Supervisor Kellum.
So 2 candidates have some local government experience and what one doesn't. So I'll go by Mr. Mahalik's rules. And if you have government experience, tell me why that experience is a good thing for the county board. And if you don't have experience, I mean, why that's a good thing.
I do not have any government experience. I don't think it's a bad thing. I've always been interested in it. I just don't have any real board experience. I'm on the board at where I work, but I have no experience in government itself. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's nice to get an outside, fresh look at, you know, the outside world and a new blood. Somebody that hasn't been doing it for 20 years, I may bring some fresh new ideas in. I'm not doing it for any political gain. I have no business in the area. I'm doing it as just a tax-paying citizen of Farmington. And I think it'd be a good thing to have a fresh voice on the board.
Being involved in politics, I don't think it has a big effect on one's ability to serve on the county board. I think it does have a little merit with some experience on dealing with people and dealing with budgets and numbers at the township level. But I think anyone could serve either way, personally.
I guess I'll kind of repeat what I said before is knowing, excuse me, knowing how government operates and what money is needed, where money is spent. It gives you an understanding that you can share with the residents of the district, help them understand. Maybe they're upset about things. I guess it's a good asset to bring to the board. Understanding I'm here today seeking this supervisor position, not because I'm disappointed in the county. It's because I believe we're headed in the right direction, and I'd like to be part of that team, makes those decisions. So, thank you.
Supervisor Basson.
Yes, it's a question for Attorney Stern. Being that we have two members of the city council for West Bend on the board, and we have basically their employee applying for this job, is that a conflict to them? Do they need to abstain themselves from this vote then?
Well, I can't make anybody vote or not vote. I think they have to determine whether or not they believe that they have a personal stake or interest in the outcome of the vote because of their position. As I've said before, conflicts of that nature are generally pretty personal. You have to determine whether you think you're impartial or not, if you're affected by some personal.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up, make that note. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for the candidates?
I'd like each one of them to tell me who they are again, the names.
Okay.
My name is Keith Steffen.
Can you step up the microphone again? So you're just speaking to it so everybody can hear.
My name is Keith Steffen.
Chris Elby.
Doug Newman.
Supervisor Martin?
Yes, I'd just like to ask Mr. Newman a question relative to your employment with the city of West Bend, and how you will relate to anyone from the city trying to influence you relative to county board action coming up that does reflect upon the city, or think the city would find advantage in it. How would you separate those two issues?
Well, when I show up for the county board, my priorities, my loyalty is at the county board level. When I show up at my work, I could separate those. I've spoken to my superiors about this, and I've gotten their full support for commitment levels that may be needed. As far as meetings, daytime meetings, I am a salaried employee, so I have a very flexible schedule that allow me to attend different schedules that may come up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, are there any other questions for the candidates? Okay, seeing none, open the floor for nominations. You will not need a second to make a nomination.
I would like to nominate Doug Newman.
Doug Newman's nominated.
I'd like to nominate Chris Olby.
I'd like to nominate Keith Steffen.
Okay, all three have been nominated. We will begin with a ballot, vote by ballot. They're on your desk. Supervisor Krebs?
Can you just go over, is this a simple majority, or what's the first
It
requirement?
is a simple majority. The first candidate that receives 14 votes will be appointed as supervisor for District 11.
Thank you.
Put our names on there?
Well, at least you want the vote to count.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, oops. Yeah, right. A little bit of Florida action.
Very good job. I took the chairman.
If there's 30 votes, if there's 30 votes, we don't.
Well, yeah, I put it, I don't have any votes left.
Everybody have to vote in?
Broward County.
Are you a counting official and it doesn't count from six? You ready, Ashley? Yes. Keith Steffen. Chris Albee. Christopher Albee. Chris Albee. Doug Newman. Chris Albee. Keith Steffen. Doug Newman. Chris Albee. Keith Steffen. Keith Steffen. Keith Steffen. Doug Newman. Doug Newman. Doug Newman. Keith Steffen. Keith Steffen. Chris Albee. Keith Steffen. Chris Albee. Keith Steffen. Doug Newman. Doug Newman. Chris Albee. Keith Steffen.
Okay, as we do in our other elections, the top two will advance again and we'll revote. The names are Chris Albee and Keith Steffen.
I wrote his name when I'm supposed to write mine. I'd like to put my name in there.
No voting for yourself.
Very good, thank you. That would have done with that, with the.
Yeah, hanging chad.
I'm gonna hand him you one, I'm gonna hang you fired.
You don't remember that? Is everybody in?
Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Christopher J. Elby, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Steffen, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Keith Steffen, Keith Steffen, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Chris Elby, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Chris Elby, Chris Elby.
Are you missing one?
Wait, how come we have
We're missing one.
25?
Yeah, we're missing
So we
one.
forget to vote?
The ballot's on the floor.
Can you count them, maybe?
Can you
Here.
recount them? Recount them.
Here.
Florida.
Howard.
Twelve. I have 12. I have 12. Someone didn't vote.
I didn't vote.
Oh, Roger didn't vote.
Oh,
We'll revote.
Linda, do we have extra ballots?
They should all.
We'll
All right.
revote again. Make sure everybody puts it in. Well, you got 20, 11 districts.
That's what they did last time.
There you go, see what happens. Can't be a tie this time.
Keith Steffen, Christopher Elby, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby,
Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Steffen, Steffen,
I don't like all those ones, I see it up there.
Let's wait till the end.
okay. Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby, Chris Elby, Keith Steffen, Chris Elby.
Okay, congratulations. Keith Steffen, you are District 11 Supervisor. Will the
I am honored and ready to serve.
Sergeant at Arms please seat Mr. Steffen? What's that? Oh, we need to, we need to have you come forward and do the oath, Mr. Steffen.
So if you want to come right here. Or do we want to have him there? So we can you can stay right there, and then you'll just raise your right hand.
I, Keith A. Steffen,
I, Keith A. Steffen,
having been elected to the office of Washington County Board Supervisor, District 11,
having been elected to Board Supervisor, District of Washington County, District 11,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully and impartially
will faithfully and unimpartially
discharge the duties of said office
discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability.
so help me God.
So help me God.
It's EI, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
A
Yes.
STEPHAN.
Correct.
That's your copy, and then I'm just gonna have you sign it during the city board.
Take a quick 3-minute bio break, then pursue.
All right, well, let's take a 3-minute break.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is our presentation of petitions. Petition 2, Planning and Parks Department, rezoning and shoreline wetland floodplain map amendments, Town of Trenton. Along with that, the report 2, Planning and Parks Department, rezoning and shoreline wetland floodplain map amendments, Town of Trenton. And we're also going to be moving number K, 2018 ordinance 8, shoreline wetland floodplain zoning maps, which is pertinent to this. Who do we begin? We need presentation? Do we need anything?
Phil's here if you have any questions.
Phil is here for any questions?
Want to give a report or just?
You can give a brief one if you like.
This is a small property on Highway 33, just
What?
east.
Take the microphone and point it at you, please. Thank you very much for that. Or? Okay.
All right. We got a small property on Highway 33, south side, just east of the West Bend Lakes Golf Club house, and just west of the Town of Trenton Hall. And they have had a floodplain study done on this parcel because the whole parcel was considered floodplain. The study showed that the whole parcel is out of the floodplain. We therefore, the owners hired an engineering group, had a floodplain study done. That was approved by the DNR. It was also approved by FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and meets all the requirements for being amended on the official Washington County Shoreline Wetland and Floodplain zoning map. So that's what I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions regarding that? Then we can move right to ordinance 8. Entertain a motion. Supervisor Basil, Supervisor Brandt, second. Any further discussion? We'll vote electronically on this. Ordinance passes 25-1. Okay, additionally, we're going to move agenda number H, 2008 Resolution 55, advisory resolution supporting increased funding and oversight reforms for Wisconsin Child Protective Services System. I'll entertain a motion Supervisor Kelling, Supervisor Kist. Any discussion on this?
Resolution 55.
We are on Resolution 56. I'm sorry, Resolution 55. Advisory resolutions supporting increased funding and oversight reforms for Wisconsin's Child Protective Services System. Okay, question, Supervisor Schleifer.
Could we have a brief explanation of what this is?
Sure.
Certainly. So we've got a couple of people here. Julie Driscoll is our Human Services Director, dancing on the side, and Ethan Hollenberg, our Public Affairs Coordinator. Some of you were at the Wisconsin Counties Association conference. There were several sessions talking about Child Protective Services and a number of the asks, fiscal asks, that the Counties Association was going to go down the path of looking for as part of the state budget process. This is Washington County's version of it, and both of these two can explain in detail how our ask is slightly different from WCA's.
Politically, WCA is making this one of their largest, actually the largest ask they've ever asked. They're asking for $30 million a year in the biennium for the 71 county system. Milwaukee's a little different, different pot of money. The department has, this is Children and Families, has requested $5 million increase, which would make it the second biennium that this money hasn't increased.
That's the State Department.
The State Department of Children and Families. Our resolution, we can't have it quite wrapped our head around how much money Washington County needs. We know that our costs have increased a third. We know cases have increased a third. And we are not sure that $60 million is a reality in the next budget. So we don't put a dollar amount there. We're just concerned because the third is directly onto the tax levy. WCA argues that the requirement of a match from the county is only something like 9%, and we're well over 60% of it being county funded. So WCA is going to do an all-out campaign on this. I just had a briefing on Friday related to this. They're going to do Facebook and other social media videos similar to the dark store. They're going to make this a huge issue. From the county staff's perspective, we feel this resolution is important because we want to find a Washington County solution that doesn't require tons and tons of money or the largest ask that's ever been happened. We really want to find out why our cases, and Coral Klein, who's a division administrator in our county, is that what we call him? Division manager in our county, and Julie are really drilling down to figure out what is needed for this, because a lot of these cases are not, they're not going away through attrition because they're opioid addiction. So Josh and I have met with the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. We're really looking at a wide approach on why is this happening, and is this money, what is the real ask that we should be going for? And the resolution tells us to do that.
Julie, could you speak specifically to some of the department mechanics, please?
In regards to?
In regards to what child CPS actually
Yeah,
is
sure.
and does.
So essentially in our Children and Families Division, there are two things that occur. We handle any calls for abuse and neglect concerns, and when, safety cannot be controlled for, we are responsible for removing children and placing them in out-of-home care. The second sort of part of our division is our juvenile justice or our youth justice program, and so working with youth who are interacting with the criminal justice system. Many times the issues of youth justice are connected to family stability, issues going on in the family home. And so particularly this resolution focuses on CPS because with the opioid issues and the opioid epidemic, we are seeing an increase in children in out-of-home care, as well as an increase in children who are languishing in out-of-home care. So they're staying in out-of-home care for longer periods of time, which impacts our caseload and keeps our cases at a higher rate.
Supervisor Mahalik?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we look at what was in our packet as regards to the resolution, if you look at line 24, whereas the opioid epidemic has brought Wisconsin's child welfare system to a point of crisis, increasing the concern about a system's ability to meet its obligation to children and families, I was wondering if Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce might want to join with the WCA, seeing we're at opposite ends when it comes to something like Dark Star, which of course gives us money to help fund some of this stuff. If they would be so kind as to say, look, we have a problem with our within our employee base, because that's exactly what happens. A number of these people with opioid problems work at some of the companies that are represented within Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. So I would like to see this as an area where we might be able to connect to factions that are kind of opposite of one another, where we can come together on this. And I hate to say bipartisan because it's not really party driven, but it's issue driven. That they would understand that this is something that is critical, and oftentimes the counties are treating employees of their members, and it's important for us, for them to understand that what's happening to those children is happening to their future employees. And I think that understanding needs to be there. Is that something that we can push at them, that they would understand, and maybe give us another group to knock on the door of legislators and our upcoming governor to be able to push this through?
WC is coalition building, simplistically, but should you pass this resolution, I will reach out to Chris Reeder at WMC with that feedback, because he does education and health for them from a government affairs perspective. I know him reasonably well. I've worked with him on stuff. So if it's feedback that we've received, we will reach out to Chris on the county's behalf once we have the authority to do so from the board.
Sounds great, thank you.
Supervisor Kelly?
I'm sure most, if not all of us in this room probably already agree with this resolution, but something I just want to bring a point to. In Route 50, which I know floods your email box and you like to get rid of, there wasn't actually a real interesting article in how this relates to the county level. Opioid addiction around Ohio, and I believe it was Kentucky, certain counties around major metropolitan areas, they've been basically overrun on their finances with children that were left without parents due to opioid addiction, and it swallowed up massive amounts of their revenues. So while our problem isn't quite to the level of those counties in those states yet, it could very well be. We have not stopped this. And so I really, if you're wondering how it relates to county government, this is our future. This is a possibility that we could be overrun like these other counties. And getting out front of this now would be an important step in the fight against the opioid epidemic, and not just the people who suffer from it directly, but also the children that are suffering from this through broken families. So if you have any doubts in your mind, keep that in there. It's that this is going to be necessary and more necessary in the future. Hopefully not, but we need to prepare for that. We're a very forward-thinking group, and I'd like to make sure we stay that way. Thank you.
So the article in Route 50 is consistent with what the ask of WCA is. I think what the presentation from WICSA, the Human Service Administrator Group, I believe that's relatively consistent. I didn't read the article, but it sounds like...
It was a year ago.
It sounds like the same thought process. La Crosse County was the primary presenter at the WCA conference, for those of you who were not there. Their numbers are staggering. Our concern, and you're going to hear this as you go through the rest of the advisory resolutions tonight, you're going to hear an advisory resolutions coming forth in the next couple of months at your committees and at the county board meetings in the future. Our concern is that waving your hands up and down and asking for $60 million just is not realistic. And with a split legislature, legislature from the governor in terms of partisanship, there's going to need to be a real careful approach to actually getting things done. And so when we bring these to your committees, this one is a very good example. Our approach thus far has been to try and find a Washington County solution that we think can actually pass the legislature. There's essentially no way that we're going to get $60 million in the biennium to do this. I mean, practically speaking, it's just not going to happen, which is why the State Department only asked for 5. So keep that in mind as you're having this discussion and as you have future discussions. We're trying to present things to you in such a way as posture Washington County to be the county that can kind of bridge the gap, that can actually come up with a solution. Certainly that works for Washington County, but hopefully that works for other counties. And so that's why it's more nuanced than maybe you've seen in the past when WCA has passed a resolution, asked us to pass it, and we just pass it. We're trying to be a little bit more nimble, a little bit more flexible on our side than we have in the past, because now we have somebody who can actively work in the legislature to try and get something done. So I want to be clear about that you're not thinking this is generic, or you're wondering why maybe we're posturing what might be appear to be opposed to WCA. I don't think we're opposed to WCA. I think we're trying to be the ones that can negotiate a solution, and I'm not sure that a $60 million ask is going to make a lot of friends in the 2 legislative chambers. Fairly put?
Yeah, I think that's fair. The budget process is going to be, I've been through 3 of them, and this one's going to be a lot different. I'm already hearing concerns, changes to how we've done things. So $60 million and jumping up and down, or the governor puts it in the budget and thinking we have a win, not going to happen this time around.
Supervisor Gallus?
Thank you. So trying to take that a 3% increase in caseload and expense, and I'm trying to figure out how it's impacting our budget, and are we accounting for it in 2019 budget for overtures? And I know, I think it's under Human Services Department, and looking through lines, child and children and family, is that where we're capturing?
Yeah, that's correct. So I would say, at this point, we're from 2012 to 2016, which is the data that we have at this point in time, we're spending 30% more on out-of-home care. And so that equals about $600,000 more. So at this point in time, we've been able to, balance the budget based on, the county puts in the portion that we have, as Ethan described. The state requires a 9% match. We're blowing that out of the water as far as what our match is. So the county is picking up, significant portions of the cost of children and families in alignment with our state-county contract. I would say, we're being very conservative in how we're budgeting. We came in with a really good budget this year and came in on target, but we're not able to offer extra services, right? We're not able to offer some of the more preventative services. We're not able to offer some things that, could sway, families a little bit more. We're working on that through grant opportunities and partnerships. But it doesn't give us a lot of options or opportunities when the dollars are essentially for us to provide the service to assure the safety of kids.
So something for you to consider, Supervisor Galatz, as you're contemplating this, the resolution that WCA put forward and the presentation that we saw that resulted in this resolution that you're considering really came forward in the middle of September. And the resolution itself, I don't think, was actually finalized and being pushed through WCA until even more recently, including this last Friday, where they were having more discussions about it at their committee level. So it's kind of an evolving thing. What my concern is, and I believe both Julie and Ethan share this concern, if I'm wrong, please say so, but when we saw the presentation at WCA, what I read at the end was they threw everything they possibly could at the wall, including the opioid thing, and said, we need more money. Well, there's probably a dozen issues that are buried into that presentation, and opioids very well could be an issue. But if I'm a legislator and I hear that, my first response is, well, if it's opioids that's the issue, we know that it's the hip drug right now, and when that goes away, this will start to come back down. So do you need one-time funding? But that's not what they're asking for. So this is where we're trying to be generic enough in the resolution to be flexible, but at the same time address what is clearly, as Director Driscoll pointed out, it's clearly an issue and it's been on an upward trend, but we've got to drill down and find out what's the real problem. And the other thing that concerns me with regard to what WCA has proposed is, and Director Driscoll just alluded to it, other counties, I believe, are probably providing other services above and beyond what's mandated. I don't know what those are. I don't think any of the three of us know exactly what those are. But if your costs are, I believe some of you were at this presentation, but they were talking 1,000% higher than what they need to be. So, something tells me that that's not quite right. I'm not exactly sure how they get there. So we're trying to be a team player with WCA. We know there is definitely a problem, but we're going to try to get down to what exactly is the issue, at least here, and then have both of these teammates try and attack it, and probably ask several of you, particularly folks on the Human Services Committee, to help when it comes to time to start lobbying for it.
And I think that's maybe a point that I didn't come across, and I'll try to do now, is it's an optic, right? So if we're saying big pile of money, but we can't articulate how it's impacting our budget, how we're overspending, and in what areas, and what services, mandatory services we can't provide or are impacted, I think that's the message that we have to be able to send.
Thank you. Supervisor Jenkins.
My question was answered.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, we have a motion and a second. We'll vote this electronically.
We get to vote twice.
Motion passes unanimously. Back to the agenda, the approval of the new Washington County logo and tagline, we're going to move to the end of the agenda. And I'm also going to ask for a motion to postpone 2018 resolution 42. And Josh, will you give an explanation prior to?
Similar to last month when I explained that this was,
Just a point of order.
Yes, please.
Can you tell us what number we're talking about instead of?
We are on 8A.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because we're kind of bouncing around.
Yeah,
today.
you've been bouncing around a lot.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
ready? Similar to last month when we asked for postponement, you won't be surprised to find out that the federal government has, again, been slower than we'd like. And it's now the month of December that they've kicked their deadline back to. And so at the direction of the executive committee, they had told us to make the recommendation to postpone this if the feds had not given their formal written approval. They haven't. We expect it in December, so we're asking you to push it a month again.
Okay, entertain a motion to postpone. Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Bossert. We need to do electronic on this? Okay, we'll vote electronically on this.
Postpone 8A.
Motion passes unanimously. Sorry about that. Eight B, the resolution 50, the 2019 budget appropriation.
So hopefully by now, everybody's had an opportunity to read through the budget. Judging by the fact that we had no amendments submitted through our traditional amendment process, I assume that to be true. But just a couple of things that are worth highlighting. First of all, the rate that people are most interested in, typically the property tax rate, will be reduced from $2.49 per thousand to $2.39 per thousand. For the second consecutive year, this is the lowest tax rate in over a century. The property tax levy is increasing just over $200,000. In reality, I will tell you that it's actually closer to $400,000. The way that the calculation works now, because real property is being taxed, personal property is being taxed differently and allocated differently in the worksheet that is used. Some of that seems to disappear. In reality, the total amount we're collecting is in that $400,000 range, higher. So the $200,000 is a little deceiving, although you can blatantly say property tax levy only went up $211,000 because that's what the worksheet says. Otherwise, this budget was a fantastic job. I have to thank department heads, specifically Margie Hammers and the budget team for the work that they did on putting the budget together. The department head team. For those of you who weren't able to be at the executive committee meeting and the public hearing, the process started with budget targets, establishing budget targets for every single department. And those targets are based on what the individual members of the budget team sitting down with me have identified as they've worked with departments throughout the year on where we think we need to be. As you all know, we walk into every single budget year with a deficit and a gap. This year was no different. A couple of things that are worth noting though are the fact that we came in with a balanced budget. We hit every goal that we established back in the month of May when I gave the State of the County address. We're excited to present you with a budget that actually inside of it funds the 2050 Transportation Sustainability Plan fully. This budget does increase debt to the county, however, it does not increase the taxable amount of debt. In other words, we're not increasing the property tax levy to pay for that debt. We've done that within. Our health insurance fund is in fantastic shape from where it was 4 years ago. You remember when I started, we had a pretty serious issue with our health insurance. That has been resolved, and we're in 2019. Not only is that fund balance fully funded, but we're able to reduce the expense side of that particular budget, which is actually just spread out within the entirety of the general fund and all operating funds. So I'm excited to present the budget as you have it, as you have seen it. If you have questions specifically about it, I'd welcome those questions. I thank you for the opportunity to be able to put it together and for the cooperation and assistance of all of the committees as we went through the process in executive committee and going through the public hearing. So if you have questions, I'm happy to entertain those.
Yeah, before we start with the questions, why don't we have a motion and second so we can do that? Motion, Supervisor Kelly, Supervisor Samisek. You never get it. Or what? You corrected me 20 times, you still get it wrong. Okay. Supervisor Bassett.
As chairman of public safety, I want to commend Josh for this work that he did with this budget and the entire team. Because of public safety, the sheriff's budget came in $300,000 over what his projected budget was. And with Josh's great work and Margie and the team, they were allowed to add another sheriff, a detective, and the other things that the sheriff needed on this list. So, job well done, Josh.
Supervisor Krebs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you go back to the $400,000 that are new revenues, but only 211 is actually on the tax levy increase?
Yes.
Walk me through that fuzzy math.
Sure. Margie, could you bail us out here?
So every year, the state releases a levy limit worksheet. It's basically the worksheet we need to use to determine how much tax levy we can levy. There was a change in the state's budget 2 years ago, their 17 to 19 budget? Okay. The state 17 to 19 budget that removed or created a further exemption for manufacturing related property. As a result, there's less property that is taxable through the tax levy. So the state, to make up for that, decided that they would take a look at what they determined we were getting through the tax levy on that property and give us a flat dollar amount instead as a state aid. Because they did that and because it was related to the tax levy, they then modified the tax levy worksheet to exclude that from the calculation. So if we had used the tax levy worksheet as it was previously provided before this change, it was about a $400,000 increase from net new construction. Because we have to net out this new state aid, it now comes down to about the $211,000, and in the state aid of $188,790 then makes up the total. So we're not really getting our full net new construction this year in tax levy. We're getting a portion of it in tax levy and a portion of it in state aids instead.
So the personal property tax is only on the net new construction.
Net new construction covers, net new construction covers all.
Properties.
Yes, yeah.
But the 190,000 roughly that the state supplies instead is because that's manufacturing.
Is related to manufacturing personal property, not real property. And so when we levy a tax, it's not just on real property, it's not just homes and lands, it's also on personal property of certain kinds that the state allows for. The state removed one of those kinds of personal property that we can levy on, they replaced it with state aid instead.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in addition, there is a green sheet on your desk, which is an amendment, a request for amendment to line 24 on page 5 of the ordinance.
That's the next one.
I'm
We need
sorry.
to vote on
Oh,
this.
sorry.
It's worth mentioning though, because it is technically a change to the budget, and I had gotten some calls about this procedure. Historically, for those of you who are new, the ordinance that you're gonna consider the very next item is all of the ordinance language that's baked into this budget. So any changes that we've put into the budget that have gone through all of your committees, went through executive, are in that ordinance. What you're seeing on the green sheet was essentially a typographical error. It wasn't caught until just a couple of days ago. The rate for that particular employee class should have gone up, and it hadn't been in the ordinance before, so now it will go up. So that ordinance, the green sheet, the ordinance that follows is cleanup, and they are connected to one another. If you approve this budget, you're in essence approving the next ordinance. The next ordinance is essentially a formality.
Supervisor Krebs, to the budget or to?
I'm not sure, it's kind of more related to ordinance 9, but since they're kind of tied
Okay,
together, I
well,
don't know.
we'll wait for that. I was a little out of turn there, so my apologies. Unless it,
However you want to proceed, they're tied together, so it's hard to divorce one from the
yeah, go
other.
ahead with it.
In the ordinance 9, reading through the positions, there's a lot of them that are lined out, it appears. I guess I'm looking for clarification, how many positions are we reducing or gaining in the 2019 budget? Are we gonna be having less authorized positions or more?
We have that number somewhere, let me try to find it.
It's actually in the full budget, sorry. It's within the supplemental section of the full budget document. There is a report on FTE, and there is a comparison between 2018 and 2019. So that's where we'll find it. I can look it up quick, just let me get to it, but it is in there.
Page 124, it looks like in the.
It sounds about right.
Okay, thank you, that's all I was looking for.
Supervisor Kelly.
Seeing as we're on ordinance 9, just a quick question. There's a pay increase for 3% to certain grades, 11A, 13A, and 14A, and then 2% to the rest. Could you explain who these people are that are getting an extra 1%?
So, yes, so the 3% positions are by union contract. It's the only union that the county has left, it's the Deputy Sheriff's Association. There are positions outside of the Deputy Sheriff's Association that we have administratively, and I guess this was some direction in the past. So historically, we have moved those positions up consistently. So for example, a deputy who's been here for more than 5 years is in their 5th grade, the highest level they can get paid. Sergeant positions, lieutenant positions need to increase in accordance, because if, for example, we give a 2% raise to a sergeant and a 3% raise to a deputy, they start to creep together, and pretty soon deputies at the top end are making more than sergeants at the bottom end, and so who would want to be promoted for a pay cut? So that's essential, I mean, that's the simple way to explain it, but the positions that you see are related to that.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll vote on this electronically. Just so everyone's clear, we're voting on the budget. Budget passes unanimously. On to 8C, which is ordinance number 9. Entertain a motion. Supervisor Brandt, Supervisor Dice. Any further discussion, any more questions on that? We need to entertain a motion to amend. This is a requested amendment. Supervisor Carr, Supervisor Sorcy. Any further questions on the amendment? We will vote on the amendment first.
And that's the green sheet.
Correct.
That's the green sheet? Right. All in favor will be aye. passes unanimously. Now we will vote on the ordinance, number 9. Wait for a second. Have to reset the board. Okay, we can vote now. Passes unanimously. Moving on to 8D, Resolution 51, avoiding stale checks. Supervisor Brazel?
Looking for motion?
Yeah, sorry. Supervisor Brazel. Supervisor Hardwick. Keep me honest, that's good. Yeah. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Vote electronically. Aye. Passes unanimously. 8E, 2018 Resolution 52, delegate county board authority for approving Wisconsin Land Information Program grant applications to the Land Information Officer. Take a motion to accept. Supervisor Kiss, Supervisor Goddard. Josh, you want to give a little bit on that, or?
I'm hoping the committee report explained it sufficiently. If you have questions. Basically, it's putting this grant process through our grant policy rather than bringing it to the board, mostly because it's typically cyclical.
Supervisor Mahalik?
Saying we have a new member, and whenever anything starts out, delegate county board authority, it gives me pause. So if you could go on why you feel this is necessary, that would be wonderful.
So the title of our administrative policy for grant management is routine and minor grant policy. It's our belief that the Wisconsin Land Information Program grant is routine. We've, on an annual basis, without your approval to delegate this authority, this grant has to come to you. We're talking about pretty small grants on an annual basis. And occasionally there's larger grants, but we've never denied one. They're typically for the purposes of improving our land information, like GIS or GIS mapping. And we've been very, very, very conservative with how we use those dollars. Sharon?
Have we ever turned down a grant? To your knowledge?
Yes. But not since I've been here, because we haven't asked for grants that we know would not get approved. So this grant specifically, and the land information program specifically, we have handled very conservatively. For example, we get a certain fee for the land information officer in our land information division through the Register of Deeds office on real estate transactions that many counties take and then use for operation. We have always used it exclusively for capital, which is pretty unique. So we're able to have a more sophisticated program because that is a dedicated revenue source. So when you hear the state use the term seg fees, segregated funds, we've actually segregated these funds when a lot of counties have just bled it into the general fund. This is pretty much the same thing. Typically when we come with these, it's routine, and so approval, basically we're adding a month to a process for no good reason.
The good reason is you're not going to be here forever, and I appreciate the fact that you keep it segregated, but I don't know what...
That was before me.
Well, I'm saying I don't know what the next person's going to do, so...
Understood.
Is there some type of a terrible thing that happens if we actually do our job in reviewing these and make it wait another month so we have the opportunity to take a look at it?
Like I said, we're talking about $1,000 training and education grant, and occasionally a 50,000 strategic initiative grant, which is always tied to specifically improving the, our GIS or land information records. If I felt like, you know, we're gonna add positions or do something outrageous like that, then I would say yes. But generally speaking, I mean, it's really not policy decisions. It's essentially, do we keep training people to use land information and do it? And on occasion, do we make strategic investments, which typically the state's pushing us to do anyway? That's why they're giving the grants. So, yes, I mean, it wouldn't kill us, no. I mean, we've done it for however many years. I know Joe's on land information. It's been a long, long time. We've been coming to the board for $1,000. Next time we come for 1,000, if we keep doing it, somebody's gonna say, why are we approving a $1,000 grant? So it really is your call. We just felt these are so routine that it's worth coming to you and saying, let's change the process.
Supervisor Gals?
I would echo that. That was the discussion we had about process improvement and efficiency, to the point of it being minor grants. The committee wasn't concerned about not following policy, if you will, and if that's a concern that an action not by the board would run afoul, we didn't believe that risk was there. It was minor because we have other procedures that would be adhered to.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go electronically on this. Motion passes 25-1. Moving to 8F. 2018 grant application, Fund for Lake Michigan grant. Supervisor Gallus, Supervisor Sorcy. Any questions on this? Supervisor Merton?
Since it's in the town of Polk, and I really don't quite understand where this is involved with the Lake Michigan grant, whatever, can you explain that a little further?
Trying to see if there's anybody who can explain it better than I can.
We discussed this extensively in committee. Basically, our county conservationist has identified this stream that is eroding quite badly. And it flows into Cedar Creek, which flows into Milwaukee River, which flows into Lake Michigan. So that qualifies it for clean water Lake Michigan. So it's a real win-win.
I just never heard of the Polk Springs Creek.
It's a small.
It's hard to believe it exists then. That wasn't a shot. It was a compliment.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll vote on this electronically. Motion passes unanimously. Moving forward to 8G, 2018 Resolution 54, Washington County endorsement of amendment to regional water quality management plan for the village of Germantown. Take a motion. Supervisor Conrad, Supervisor Carr. Supervisor Krebs.
Yeah, my question is related to, by expanding a sewer service area, is that going to be forcing people onto a sewer service that residents of that area may not want currently?
It's possible. It's possible.
Under county code, they might be denied a permit to replace existing septic system if other options are available. I'm wondering is this one of those things where is this gonna cross that threshold that they could be denied future permits for private sewer systems?
It's theoretically possible. I'm not aware of a single home in that area. Just trying to think.
I don't know the area very well at all. I'm just more relating it back to what the city of Hartford and the town of Hartford have talked about with their sewer service areas.
Yep.
And that's what sparks my thought.
Yep, and that's why I say it's theoretically possible. The land that we're talking about is north with regard to this, is north and east of the Holy Hill intersection with I-41. So it would be specifically the Briggs and Stratton land and everything surrounding it. So essentially what Germantown is trying to do is get the sewer service area up to that spot, because otherwise they couldn't have sewer there. And yes, theoretically, if it goes past a house that has a holding tank or a septic system, at some point they could be forced to go to the septic system, or to the sanitary sewer system. But the homes that I can think of in that general area have either been bought and torn down or are planned to be bought and torn down relative to the development that's happening. There's also some area adjacent to what is currently being developed or planned to being developed industrial that is likely to be residential. So those would be new homes without existing systems, to your point. But there may be, I'm not sure if there's more than one or two, but we're not talking about a lot, and yes, it is possible.
Okay. Overall, I would support this, but just for those couple residents, I can't support it then. Thank you.
Supervisor Brandon?
I'd just like to point out that this entire project is within the village of Germantown. And they may have ordinances, that cover that type of a thing that Supervisor Krebs was asking about. I know in the village of Slinger, we've got sewer that extends past some properties that had private things, and it's usually, you don't do anything until they request to hook up. Now, on the other hand, we got a situation where our sewer ran adjacent to town properties, and in that case, we usually don't approve divisions of the town property without it being hooked up to sanitary sewer. Very expensive to run sanitary sewer, so it's behooves the villages and the cities to, connect as many properties as possible. And the other benefit, of course, is the more properties you get on municipal sewers, the better it is for groundwater.
Correct, and that's a great point, because typically, I think to Supervisor Krebs' point, typically this is a city-town or village-town issue. In this particular case, this is all within the village boundary of the village of Germantown. And so essentially they need our approval in order to do what they wish with MMSD, not go into the town of Germantown or the town of Richfield, which is of course now a village. So it's a little bit different than I think what you're used to, but it's still, that being said, it's possible that somebody somewhere could be forced at some point to go onto a sanitary sewer system. So both are true.
In addition, Supervisor Krebs, I attended most of the planning commission meetings for this development, and the property owner that owned the property adjacent to the freeway west of the development, the Zilber development, petitioned to be on the sewer, into the sewer district, and was not allowed to be. So it's kind of up to the village what they do allow. Supervisor Schleifen.
Most of my question was already answered by Mr. Shulman, but there is one small area, Area C, that was included, and that is gonna be residential, but they wanna be on sewer. So this has already been through sewer pack approval. The analysis was done on the size of the systems, so it's all been pretty well vetted.
Supervisor Bertram.
I guess just a comment that what you had said, Josh, is that it's possible, it's very possible. Being in the town, I mean, I keep saying that over and over again, pretty much that, because the townspeople, especially those that live on the edge of a village or a city or something like that, if something goes close and they can get you on city sewer, you're gonna go on city sewer. Because again, to someone else that said it, anytime, like in the town of Barton, let's just take it because I'm there. The Milwaukee River runs through there. So anybody that touches that river, if they can get sewer to be put through, you're going on there. Because the first thing they say is the quality of the river is gonna be better. So it's one of those things where it all sounds great, but for people on the outlying areas that don't want to go in, a lot of times they're pressured pretty strong to go in, especially if there's any way that sewer goes past their property. Thank you.
So in this particular case, just to be clear, I'm just looking at an aerial photograph of the area. I can see 2 homes. There might be 3. So when I said there's a chance, the homes that are anywhere near that development are already on the Planning Commission's approval process for development into industrial property, excuse me. And so when you subtract out those homes, I only meant that we're talking about maybe 1 or 2. I don't know their map exactly. But it's not similar to if a whole entire subdivision is surrounded. I know, for example, in the city of Hartford on the south side by Monroe Street, there's large swaths of town subdivision that are almost completely, or in some cases completely surrounded by the city. In this case, it's almost all agricultural land that has almost all been sold or has an option by a developer and is being prepared for this. So there might be a single home here or there in the village that is currently on a septic system, but it's 98% probably that's already planned for the purpose that they're seeking the extension for. So it's both in this particular case.
Supervisor Jenkins.
Just a point of clarification, so I understand. What is the purpose of the county having a say in this village issue?
That's a wonderful question. I don't know the answer to the question.
Okay, then I'm voting no. Thanks.
Supervisor Mahal.
Only because it was referenced by Supervisor Krebs and then by Administrator Shulman. Just as a point of clarification, to my knowledge, none of the people that are completely surrounded by the city of Hartford are being forced onto the Hartford sewer system. We are letting them come on one by each, which is an expensive way to do it, but we are allowing that freedom to all of those individuals, and I wanted to make that very clear. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I will vote on this electronically. Motion passes 23-3. Moving to 8I, 2018 Resolution 56, Advisory Resolution Supporting Reforms for Family Care Funding. Supervisor Dice, Supervisor Kiss. You want to talk to it, or?
Yeah, I'll defer to Public Affairs Coordinator.
So, 2 things. One, this is this also tied to Ordinance 11, which is letter M, and the resolution does 2 basic things. In the last biennium, one of the budget motions, which is a change by the Joint Finance Committee, in the big omnibus motion for human services, they created a matching fund with the feds to give money to assisted living facilities for the purposes of workforce issues. Everybody knows nursing aides and other direct care workers are low. In DHS's mind, skilled nursing got a straight 2% increase, and this was part of the increase for assisted living. What that did for somebody like Samaritan, which is a continuum of assisted living and skilled nursing, it created a division in how we can spend the money. So only the field's employees who are direct care workers qualify, and so it creates tension between it. So the first part of the resolution is give us flexibility in this money because we're a continuum. We need to do recruitment fairs. We need to do other different things for workforce. That was the intention of the legislation. So DHS, don't be so strict. Part 2 of it allows Samaritan, which they have done, create a policy in the staffing plan in the ordinance to spend the money in premiums for less desirable shifts or other shifts. In the first quarter, it's a 5-quarter program, or 5-period program, really. And in the first period, we returned $7,200. Without this resolution, an ordinance change, Mary Beth, we would return $15,000?
For this next quarter, we would return about $12,000 to $15,000.
$12,000 to $15,000. The intent of the money is to get in the direct care workers' hands. With the ordinance the way it is, we cannot do that. And then, so this gets us into their hands, and then Part B forces me to work with the state and say, make this a program that works more fairly for continuums of care.
Okay, any questions? Seeing no questions, we'll vote on that electronically. Resolution passes. We'll go to 8M, 2018 Ordinance 11, Washington County Classification Compensation Plan, miscellaneous rates, Samaritan Health Care Center premiums. Need a motion? Motion, Supervisor Schleif, Supervisor Gauss. Any questions regarding this? Seeing none, we vote on this electronically. Ordinance passes unanimously. 8J, 2018 Resolution 57, advisory resolution supporting the improvement of instructional programs for nursing aides. Motion, Supervisor Bossert, Supervisor Sorcy. You need an explanation, or you want?
So I'll just point out, I'll defer it over again to the Public Affairs Coordinator, but I will just point out to you that, as I mentioned last time, this is another resolution where we're trying to thread the needle and customize to Washington County, and the Public Affairs Coordinator can specifically explain that and the resolution we're asking for.
This comes from one of the associations that we're part of, the Wisconsin Association of County Homes. Did I get it right? Got it right. Walk. What happens in Wisconsin, skilled nursing's by and large are federally mandated, regulated. This is one case where the Department of Human Services has an administrative rule that is more strict than federal law. We're requesting in this simplistically to federalize state statutes for CNA training hours, to shorten it so we can get them on the floor sooner and train them in our facility.
Supervisor Kelly.
What do you mean here? You can finish your thought.
I'm okay.
Okay. So I went ahead and looked into this. Luckily, I know a whole bunch of nurses' aides, including my mother and my fiance, and found out that basically one of the classes they have to do is learn how to make a bed. Yeah, so that's part of this training. There's a whole bunch of training in here, she said, that is not necessary, but is mandated by Wisconsin law. That is not mandated in other states, and certainly not in the federal. And her opinion, my fiance, was that it certainly would be prudent to go ahead and reduce this amount of training, especially to get more people on staff. So she just wanted you to know that. Thank you.
Supervisor Gals.
To that comment, presumably the case or the hours of training requirement that would be reduced would be extraneous training like this and all the critical on patient care and privacy, you know, that obviously we're not advocating changing that.
That is correct. We are, the bill that Senator Strobel and others introduced last session, which I worked on, cited the federal regulation directly. So it would pair us with Minnesota and Iowa, and all of those requirements and all the care standards and everything else from the federal government we would still be required to do. It would not change our training program at Samaritan at all because we train rather aggressively when they come on board. The difference is, and other homes that have training programs will tell you, the federal requirement, they limit how many people can be in a class. And by having these extra hours, you have fewer classes, and so you have fewer graduates, and so you have fewer people who can go to the floor. But all of the care standards and all those procedures which you talk about, everything that Mary Beth has to keep track of, we either would train at Samaritan or would be required by the federal mandate.
Supervisor Bishop.
I spoke with an instructor of a CNA program, wondering how she felt about this, and she is in support of it. She feels the same way, that it's delaying getting staff into the workforce. They can change their curriculum. There are things from the state that are required, and so the state would have to adjust that. But she said the curriculum can be adjusted and you'll still have good workers coming out of these classes.
To that point, it's only been a handful of years that we've been above the federal standard. 6 or 7, something like that. 10 maybe. It's not been very long.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll vote on this electronically. Passes unanimously. Moving on to 8L, 2018 Ordinance 10, Washington County Staffing Plan, Samaritan Health Center, Dietary and Washington County Classification and Compensation Plan, 7.02 and 7.4. Need a motion? Motion, Supervisor Dice, Supervisor Kist. Any questions? Seeing none, all those will vote electronically on this. Motion passes unanimously. Does anyone need a short break before we delve into the logo? We'll take a 4-minute break. All right, we're back in session. We're going to go to 7B, discussion approval of the new Washington County logo and tagline. Josh is motion to approve? No, we don't need a motion to approve.
So I'm gonna, you all have in your packets all the data, so I won't go over the data. If you have questions about the data, ask away. Jamie's here to help walk through that if you do have questions. I'm simply gonna share with you the results and what our recommendation is. As you can see from the data, basically our approach was simply to take the highest vote getters and recommend that those be used. If you want to pick it apart and you choose to do something differently, certainly you're entitled to do that. We would like to ask for a motion and a vote on this by the time we're done, because we'd like the board to endorse whatever direction you decide to take. So when and if you'd like to have the discussion, we're open to it, and we're certainly not married to any one combination of slogan and new logo. But what you're looking at on the screen here is the preferred tagline or slogan, Discover, Connect, Prosper. As you can see from the data, it was relatively overwhelming vote in favor across all the different groups. Every individual group that we surveyed, county board supervisors included, department heads, citizen members, they all went for this particular tagline out of the three. So Discover, Connect, and Prosper is our recommended tagline. And unless you have any questions, I'll just go into the logo. And certainly we can go back if there's something you want to talk about. So this is the recommended logo. As you can see in your forms, it was a relatively close vote, but when you add everything together, it was the leading vote getter. The citizen group particularly, these are surveys that we posted on social media. We also sent them out to the Chamber of Commerce. We promoted them primarily through social media and the website. But the citizens voted by a relatively significant margin to go with this particular logo. You'll also notice that employees and yourselves, those of you who voted, went with a different logo. But this was the one that had the majority of votes even when we tallied them together. We also did the math to add the first and second choice, and really nothing changed. This logo came out front. These are some of the options for how the logo can be used in different formats, depending on whether it's used on a vehicle or on a sign or on letterhead or on a business card. These are some of the different ways that it can be used. We want to give you a flavor for that. We do have the same for all of them if we choose to go in another direction at a later time. This is just a mock-up of what a business card might look like. Obviously, we used an existing employee as an example, but you can just get a glimpse and a feel for if this is the direction you choose to go. This is what you're looking for, and that's it. So, if you have comments, feedback, questions, one thing I will tell you is that we had an array of feedback, particularly from employees from the county, some of which will help us moving forward as we implement. But generally speaking, that's our recommendation. And certainly if you're interested in seeing all the data, including all of the comments, there's literally hundreds of comments, which is why they were not included in your packet. But if you're interested in seeing all that, we're certainly happy to share it with you.
Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Especially when you look at the slogan that we're going to go with, placing Washington County in a box, to me, is not something I'm for. That was the one that always got to me, that we squished it into a rectangle. I'm much more for the one with the little sun on and little trees and the kind of a figurative W on there, which is the top of the three. I think by far and away that one jumps off the page at me. That's the one I would certainly recommend. I think putting Washington County as a box is a mistake. I think it sends the wrong message. My personal opinion. Thank you.
Supervisor Jenkins.
I was going to say that I enjoy the logos. I think the top vote getter probably is the most modern, I guess I would say, in my view. But my question is then implementing this, and like you said, putting it on vehicles and all that stuff, what's the additional cost to now implement this?
Yeah, so we're not planning to do it all at one time, certainly. As things, even letterhead goes out of style, we'll start to update the new stuff. Jamie is planning to have a number of meetings with a number of different departments, literally in the next day or two, tomorrow. So to start talking through what some of that looks like. like signs out in front or magnets on cars, those types of things. We're just gonna replace them as they're needed. That said, some of the signs out in front of the buildings do need replacement, and so we've been waiting for this to do that. But it won't be a carte blanche, and it won't be a mass expenditure that you see in a budget or in a capital improvement expense or general fund transfer.
I guess my comment to that would be, while I agree that that's the method to do it, I sort of disagree. I feel like if this is gonna be it and we're gonna promote it, I mean, I feel like we should go out in a bang, right? So all one time, this is like, boom, this is the new Washington County. But I understand the logistics of doing that and the cost, so that's fine.
Supervisor Morton.
I guess I would like an explanation of what is the logo. Explain it to me. What does it symbolize? What is it? I can guess, but
Yes.
it doesn't pop out.
Maybe I'll ask Jamie to help me. We got the explanation from Epic. These people are very creative. I feel like I'm doing them an injustice if I try to explain it, so maybe Jamie can.
So if I step back to that artistic moment when they explained it to us, they did talk about the sun rising over the horizon, sort of the new day, the new brand, sort of that, the next place to be, the up and coming Washington County. They talked a lot about the color scheme, which isn't showing up quite right on the screen, but that the colors they chose being extremely intentional, tying back to sort of the natural beauty of Washington County. That's why the color scheme was consistent across most of the logos.
The only other thing that jumps out to me is the kettles, the hills that reflect them. That I specifically remember.
What are the green lines at the bottom?
Rolling meadows and fields.
Oh, I thought they were a highway.
Or it should be the high. It relates to
Put it right into a logo.
Supervisor Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having worked in the court system for over 30 years and knowing all the forms they have in that office, I'm interested in hearing what the feedback was from the different departments about changing this and, what do they do with their old forms?
So if you look at the survey results, and Jamie dove through the data more than I did, so she can speak to this in detail, but if you look at the survey results, employees didn't vote for this logo. Citizens did, primarily. I mean, certainly there are employees who did. A lot of the feedback that we got revolved around the existing logo, and some people really are passionate about it. Some people think they all are terrible, including our existing logo. So there was no real easy way to boil down other than to say the votes are what they are. And maybe you can speak more specifically to that question.
Yeah, I've heard some feedback from department heads that are looking forward to an opportunity to possibly look at co-branding with their individual identities. The Samaritan, the Sheriff's Department, the existing logo, if you just look at it closely, it doesn't translate well. It's almost as though it was hand-drawn. So the use of it across electronic materials, it's very low quality, it's very hard to use, it doesn't show up well, you can't recolor the logo. So I think we're looking at providing tools for the departments to use it more fluidly in a mobile and electronic setting, and an opportunity to take some of the images and brands that the departments have and make sure that they're of a high quality. So I've heard positive feedback from most of the departments, including things like transit, where they're using it on those commercials, if you've seen those, things like that, where they're gonna be looking at the actual product being improved for that type of use. Hope that helps.
Supervisor Goddard.
Yes, thank you. I guess your answer to Mr. Jenkins of there's no cost really going to be because you're going to redo everything as needed is not a true statement, is it?
No, and it's also not what I said.
Because I know with the last logo, there was setup charges and everything else that went along with it. And I know when Ozaki County did it, I talked to a couple of supervisors from over there, when they redid their logo, it was well over $100,000. Now, you've been going around telling villages, townships, cities, everything and that about the state of Washington County. And in 5 years, 8 years, whatever, we're gonna be in dire need for money. We're gonna be way behind. Why are we spending excess money here on this when we have a logo that is just fine? You're gonna redo Roger Kearse's and mine and everybody else's here right away? Or are you gonna wait for us to retire, quit, die, whatever, and then the new guys just get them? So we have, probably at one time, we might have 5 different logos here, if you guys keep on changing.
Well, we haven't changed in quite some time.
Correct.
If we do this once every 30 years, it costs us about $1,000 a year. So I don't know where Ozaki County got the $100,000 number. Maybe they printed it on their toilet paper, I'm not sure. But that seems like a lot of money. To me, a logo and a tagline are only icons, that's it. But icons is what make people and organizations that are the size of ours move. People need to identify with something. The difficulty with our existing logo is everything that Jamie just described a few moments ago. So there's a reason that when Epic went through and gave options, that they gave you an option that's relatively similar to what we have today. They wanted to make sure that if that's what people want, they have it. What was difficult for us in making a recommendation is, that's not what the citizens voted for. So if the board says, well, there's only 400 people that voted and so they don't know and we've all been part of this longer and you want to keep it the same, fine. That's the only reason our recommendation is what it is. That was the logic, the thought process. As far as talking to the cities and talking about the fiscal cliff, I mean, you've seen the gap. You've been here for 5 years. You know as well as I do that that's just reality. I mean, you can read articles about Marathon County and Jefferson County and every other county in the state, and they're all the same. And if those cities and villages aren't telling you, and you did hear one town chairman tell you today he's got the same problem, it sounds like times about 40, but we've all got the same issue. However, as the Marathon County administrator said, the sky's not falling. We're not in a panic mode. We just need to be able to think and talk and plan and prioritize, and we've been doing that. And I think this is part of that. One of the highest priorities that the county board established before I got here was redoing our website and communicating better. That's what this is about. These things are foundational. When you go and change the website, it's all about branding and logos and taglines and how people consume information. Same thing is true with social media. That's what letterhead is. That's what press releases are. So, yes, could we have not spent $30,000? Yeah, we could have not spent $30,000. But I think it's been a long enough time since we even took a look at it, had the conversation, that it was worthwhile. And from where we went from phase 1 of our communication plan, which you endorsed as part of the strategic priorities, to where we want to go with phase 2, which is finally tackling that website, finally getting into some more direct communication with citizens, this was an appropriate spot to put it.
So I just want to comment on the pricing, just in full transparency. So we do have a $30,000 budget approved for this project. As of today, me standing here, I have paid $15,000 worth of invoices to Epic Creative. The remaining money is to be used to basically prioritize the development of the products. So getting the materials, getting the business card designs for the sheriff's department, for each department, the email signatures laid out, the letterhead, decals of all shapes and sizes, and our stakeholder meetings with the departments will help prioritize how that, at least some of that money is at least spent. And most of that will go towards that, setup of that initial of how are we rolling this out and what are the highest priorities related to the brand that the county departments have. So that is sort of the plan initially, and then beyond that, it would be excess cost. But to date, we have not spent that to get this. Really, the work ahead of us is left with getting all of that work accomplished. So I just wanted to point that out in terms of the costs.
So you did spend half of that $30,000 already to get this far.
Yes.
And you expect the other half to pay for everything else that you need going on forward yet?
I expect it to pay for what the department heads, and we believe are the highest priorities related to the products that we need to make sure that we can successfully brand the organization.
Okay. So then it is also, you had said that you're gonna replace as you needed, so like the signs on the vehicles will be replaced as those are being replaced?
Right, and there's gonna be things, if you wouldn't have said the magnetic name tags, I wouldn't have even thought about it. So there's gonna be all kinds of things. I think that the logo we have here has been around for 20 years? 16 years. 16 years? 16 years. Mr. Brandt must have made it. I remember you saying that now. So, yeah, so I'm sure it's been all over the county by this time. So it'll take some time to get through.
But on that point, there may be some things that we do initially within that budget.
I would think that you're gonna be doing some of the vehicles ahead of time, because we just sold at the highway department some tandem trucks that were purchased back in the late 70s. Okay, now, you know, they went through 2 different logos on those trucks. And if you're not gonna replace those logos, then we're gonna have the old logo on the new trucks for probably 30 years.
It's possible. I'm sure there will be a tipping point where we say, just change the stinking logos. That's not the priority.
Supervisor Murray?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of an irony. When we first moved back here in 2003, about a year later, we got a call from the Washington County Economic Development Group, and they asked us, my company, to come up with some taglines and logo concepts. And we were told at that point in time, make sure there are no blankety-blank silos in it. And it looks like we've gone back to furrows and windrows. But I do agree, keep in mind, the collateral that has been referred to here. You also have to think of what your Tourism and Visitors Bureau, they've got ads that they've got out all over the state and the US. All those ad materials are gonna have to be changed. You talk about business cards, you talk about the name badges. It's those little things that will creep in and drive your budget up very quickly.
Supervisor Hartwick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Say, I just want to know, if you think it's going to cost $30,000, where do you get that figure from? Because I know it's going to be a lot more than $30,000.
I never said it was gonna cost 30,000, I said we were.
That's what you have budgeted.
The initial phase that we're working towards is 30,000. So the product that you see here, we had to hire a consultant, we used them to help develop it and create it, that was 15. That was what Jamie was talking about. The next 15 will be the initial rollout, where we start to identify what department needs are, and those meetings that I just mentioned that Jamie's gonna have with department heads, will start to articulate where the priorities are gonna be spent first. But yeah, over time, it's certainly gonna be more than 30,000, we know that. Printing the paper we have now costs us tons of money, so, yeah, there's no doubt it's gonna be more than 30,000 over time. But again, it's been 15 years since the last time we've done this. It's essentially $2,000 a year. And we make $5 million plus decisions. You just approved a $127 million budget. This is part of what we have to, I'm sure Nike doesn't love spending money on their logo. I shouldn't have used Nike. But it's the same type of concept. Anytime there's a logo change, it's part of doing business.
What did it cost 15 years ago when you replaced them? Do you remember? Do you see the picture?
No, I don't want to tell you how old I was. I have no idea.
More than 30,000.
I don't know, I have no idea. I was in college, so I couldn't tell you.
Why are you changing it? What, just want something different, or why are you changing the logo?
I said, if the county board decides you want to go with the other W, if you look at your packet, another option is a W that's very similar The problem with the logo we have today, I mean, there's multiple problems with it, but the thing that makes it difficult about today is if you look very closely at it, it almost looks like it's hand-drawn. It's a very sophisticated logo. The color pattern, I think when we talked about, now that I'm saying this out loud, Supervisor Brandt and I talked about this, the printing to do it is not simple. So what you see, if you look at multiple logos across the county, they're not the same. And I'm sure almost none of them are the same to what the logo was 15 years ago when they originally designed it. So that's problematic when you start to deal with graphics in the era of, we're talking more about screens than we are talking about pieces of paper and lapel pins. That's where it starts to become difficult with the logo we have today. Again, that's why Epic created an option that's relatively similar to what you have today, if that's what you chose. But they also, while we're gonna do it, we're not just gonna provide one option, we'll provide you with an array. And it looks like the citizens said, yeah, we want something different. Again, the margins aren't that big. I can tell you there's more than one person who has the opinion of Supervisor Gonring that this was a waste of money, we shouldn't have done it, and they wrote it, you can read them. So if you decide there's enough of those that let's just stay with what we're at, it's certainly fine. Again, that's why I started the presentation the way I did. You are able to do what you want. But I didn't know how we can make a recommendation not consistent with what the data you have in front of you says.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bossert.
Okay, you talk about the sophistication of the logo, of the current logo. Does that add to our printing costs when we reorder stationery or put the logo on the new vehicle we bought?
If you're going to try to keep it consistent, keep the color palette consistent, and those things, yes. But that, again, I'm not overly concerned about what a magnet looks like, especially, or a logo on the side of a highway truck that's going to have salt on it for 30 years. I'm more concerned about what the digital looks like, because everybody's doing things on digital. It doesn't matter if you're a Visitors Bureau, Economic Development, or Washington County, most of the things that we're using are digital today. So that's where the trouble starts. And the logo we have today is
not digital.
Well, it was 15 years ago. So there was no such thing as a smartphone.
Yep. Just a couple comments generally to the board. I don't feel we should be too worried about the cost of this. Anytime we talk about the budget issues we face, those are structural issues with recurring expenses. Expenses that we have year after year that compound unless we deal with them. A one-time expense like this of minimal value isn't gonna swing that at all. When we're looking at budget stuff, we gotta be focused at those recurring expenses, the things we pay every year, and that if we continue to pay, they're gonna just keep piling up on us. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. As far as the major cost items, a lot of this stuff we're gonna be replacing anyway. So if we're replacing it with a logo that looks better, that's digitally better and more consistent, I don't see that as a major issue, and I would ask people to support a change at this point. Thank you.
Supervisor Carr.
Two things. First of all, it was mentioned a couple of minutes ago about information that was distributed about Washington County throughout the United States. That information is primarily distributed by the Visitors and Convention Bureau, which is also known as Visit Washington County. They have their own logo. They never use the logo for Washington County. They use their own logo, and it says Visit Washington County. And it's printed on all the advertisements that are done in the Chicago area and outside Milwaukee and Key Milwaukee Magazine and places like that. It's also used in the Visitor's Guide, which you may be interested to know. We print out 60,000 visitors' guides, which are distributed not only in the Chicago area, but also around the state, various portals, the tourist portals, so as people come into the state. They are all distributed. In fact, they're oversubscribed practically every year. So Visit Washington County is doing a huge, impressive job getting tourism dollars into the county. but they do not use the Washington County logo. Secondly, it seems to me that we're voted in here to represent the individuals who are our constituents. And if they prefer this square logo or this rectangular logo, it seems to me that our opinion doesn't really matter that much. The public seems to have spoken, and that's what they want, so it seems to me that's what we should vote in. I mean, you know, do we know more than our constituents? I don't think so.
Such a small
fraction.
So just so I understand the background, so the budget for 30,000 was already approved, right?
Correct. As part of
And-
strategic priorities, yes.
Yep, and the decision to move forward with going through this process was already approved, correct? So I just think it's silly that we're still disputing whether to change it or not, and how we think the other amount of money should be spent. We already approved it, so I'll just leave it at that.
Supervisor Brandt?
Yeah, we probably spent too much time on this anyways, but I'm gonna make it brief. I ran the printing company that originally printed the last logo back 16 years ago. County contacted a number of printers, and my firm was the only one that came up with a solution how to print that logo at that time. Today, it would be a different story. I no longer have that company. I've sold it, and I'm retired, but I can tell you I've spent 44 years in the printing business, and it drove me nuts because I saw that logo all over the place, and it was never looked the same. You know, and when we originally printed it, we made every effort that everything that was printed, business cards, envelopes, letterheads, looked the same. Somehow over the 16 years that changed. But the other point I'd make is the county goes through a bidding process with a number of printers. And I had participated in that in the past, and I can tell you, the county is getting a gall darn good deal from several printers here in the county. Sometimes I would get the bid, sometimes another printer would get the bid. But most of the time, the printer really wasn't making very much money. It was just slightly above the cost of the materials. So, compared to what a manufacturer or somebody in the service business would go to the local printer, I would say the county was paying like maybe 30% of what would retail would have been. So I would think that same thing would be going forward. And I think any three of these logos is going to work fine digitally. I think Epic did a great job, and my feeling is that by going out to a survey of employees and citizens and whatnot, and the survey showed this is what they want, we should go with it. Otherwise, in the future, let's just make the decision here and not ask anybody else. That's all. That's my comments.
Just one final comment, yeah, we probably wasted way too much time talking about this. The current graphic with the blue and the black over the green is extremely difficult to reproduce and to see, and you get it's too small, and so it's time to replace it.
Supervisor Bishop?
I'm gonna change the subject. Tagline. I don't like the word prosper. It sounds money grubby.
Good wall.
Think of that too. Were there other suggestions put in for that? I like Discovery Connect.
The question was, the comment was, I don't like Prosper. The question was, were there alternatives that were offered? Yes.
Yes, there was. We went through, let me just see if I can.
While Jamie's looking for that, I'll just note that during the strategic planning process in 2015, again, this past year, prosperity was talked about at length, and not in a money grubby sense. but a prosperous community. And so that's where that came from. And I know when they talked to us about why they chose Discover, Connect, Prosper, if you looked at, I can't remember if it was in the final 3, but in the original 10 that they chose, I think it was in 3. They used the word prosper multiple times because they felt so strongly that that's what was coming across. And they heard people using that phraseology. So that's where it came from. And it's been, and of course it's in the Bill of Rights as well.
Supervisor Krebs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion to approve the rectangular logo and also the new tagline as presented.
I'll second that.
Can we,
Second.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Supervisor Jenkins.
Can we just answer the question?
Yeah,
that's
go ahead.
outstanding?
Answer the question.
Pardon me?
Are you looking for the other 2 taglines? One was feel free, the other one team roots and prosperous future.
I see it, prosperous again, there it is.
Grow. Grow was.
So the question was, what alternative words to prosper were there recommended or suggested by folks?
Okay.
Grow, I know, was one that came up a couple times. Yeah, most of our discussion was around prosperous future, so it was strong future.
Okay, I'm gonna throw my 2 cents worth in. The logo from the 1982 Brewers with the M&B making it to a baseball and to a ball glove, I thought was one of the most clever logos ever, and they got rid of it. They use it on Fridays, right, to sell. But that was probably one of the best logos I've ever seen. This logo we have currently, I think it's very clever with the W. It shows, to me, it shows that it's got the W there, but it's bird in flight over the hills, over the rolling hills, with it behind the sunset. I think it's great. It's a great logo that we have. And could you bring up the other W one so we can all take a look at it? Do you have that? As you can tell, that was my preference, probably a lot of yours also.
Do we have it saved somewhere, Jamie?
Do we have that? No. It's on the screen. I wanted to see it up.
It's in the packet.
Yeah, that's what.
It's in the packet, yeah. It's not on the screen.
The top one has neat
But anyhow, I like that one. I'm not the most imaginative person in the world. And when I see the other 2 logos, I really don't see Washington County in them. You know, I mean, Supervisor Merton brought up one of those lines about fields. Yeah, I understand that part, but it is confusing. And I think as a board, even if we get, you know, we're a representative democracy, a representative republic, and we don't base all our decisions upon what the citizens want. We're here to make sure that we do the right thing. And so I like the W personally. I'll go along with what you guys want, what everybody wants, but to me, that says Washington County. That's my 2 cents. So,
Yeah. Oh, is it? Thank you.
it's on the middle one, I think.
There you go.
Okay.
Roll that
You
up.
see it a little bit better there.
I was just about to say, look how nice that showed up, but
Just a little pixelated.
There.
Yeah.
So obviously, the reason, like I mentioned before, that Epic went with that bottom W to the Sherman's point is it's obviously a throwback to what we have now. The Brewers actually wear the mitt and glove all the time now, not just Fridays.
Okay.
But this is supposed to capture partially the same. It would certainly be a lot easier transition if you're concerned about costs. You can't miss the W anywhere else throughout the county, so when we're transitioning from one W to another W, I think that'd be easier. Like I said, I don't know how I would have recommended to you that we don't go with the one that had the most votes, and that was the only reason I did it. So, if you feel compelled that there should be another, should go that other direction, that's fine. We certainly aren't very.
Which one did the employees like? That's what I was gonna ask.
That's in your.
Supervisor Mahalik.
I was gonna ask, what Supervisor McCune just asked, what one did the employees like? Did they like that stylized W with the sun on the left that would be long enough so you could easily print the entire new slogan underneath it, which would make a real nice.
The top one was nobody's choice, no majority's choice.
It's got this, I like the stylized W.
What is it?
but the margin was very small.
Yeah.
So the employees chose, I don't pull up the actual live results.
Yeah, that's in your packet if you can point out the page number. Does somebody have that page number?
11? So,
Page 11, sounds like.
so they had 141 votes for the classic W and 105 votes for the box logo. However, their second choice, basically they really disliked the top logo, so they were kind of split. So they,
Hey, whoa, not everyone. Yeah. You got on here somehow, okay?
right. So, but because of that, yeah, so the classic W with a small margin.
Like I said, the county board
30
supervisor
votes.
that took the survey and employees like the W.
Did you take the survey?
15 of us that took the survey.
No.
Correct. There was barely a majority of supervisors that took the survey, so. We do?
Supervisor Jenkins.
Don, can we please just vote on the motion? And then if we say no, then we can pick our second choice.
That'd be a call question.
Call a question, thank you.
Okay.
They need a 2/3 vote if they want to call a question.
Or we just like.
Well, just proceed.
Seeing there's no more discussion, we'll vote electronically on this if we want to go with what they recommended, the box and.
I swear if this is 12 to 12, 13 to 13.
I'm abstaining, so it can be. Is everybody awake? Motion passes. Like the survey. We have a logo.
We like it, ish.
Okay, the next meeting date is Wednesday, December 12th, 2018, 6 o'clock p.m. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
Hey, everybody agrees on that.
Let's all stay together now. 76.
And Supervisor Kiss. All in favor, Supervisor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
It's like a baby thing. Once it's born, it gets a rough go.